Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the clock on his computer screen. It was almost midnight, and he was still at his desk in the engineering office. The building was empty except for him. He had been working on a bridge design for 3 days straight, and needed to finish the calculations before his morning meeting. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but Jake kept drinking it anyway. He was 28 years old and worked for a small engineering firm in Denver. Most nights he went home by 6, but this project was important. The city wanted a new bridge over the river, and his company had a chance to win the contract. Jake stretched his arms above his head and yawned. His back hurt from sitting in the same position for so long. He decided to take a short break and walk around the office. As he stood up from his chair, a bright white light suddenly filled the room. The light was so bright that Jake had to close his eyes and cover them with his hands. The light seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake could feel heat on his skin and heard a low humming sound that made his teeth hurt. He tried to walk toward the door, but his legs felt heavy and strange. The humming sound got louder and louder until Jake could not think clearly. Then everything went black. When Jake opened his eyes, he was lying on a cold metal floor. The room around him was nothing like his office. The walls were made of some kind of dark material that seemed to glow with a faint blue light. The ceiling was very high and curved like the inside of a giant egg. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, and they pulsed with the same blue glow. Jake sat up slowly and looked around. His head hurt, and he felt dizzy. The air smelled different here, like metal and something else he could not identify. There were no windows in the room, and only one door that had no handle or lock that he could see. Before Jake could stand up, the door opened with a soft hissing sound. A creature walked into the room, and Jake's mouth fell open in shock. The creature was at least 7 feet tall and looked like a giant lizard that walked on 2 legs. Its skin was covered in bronze-colored scales that reflected the blue light from the walls. It had golden eyes that looked very intelligent and a long tail that moved behind it as it walked. The creature wore what looked like a military uniform made of dark fabric with silver decorations. On its chest was a symbol that Jake had never seen before. The creature looked at Jake for a long moment without saying anything. Then it spoke in perfect English. "You are awake. Good. My name is Commander Vextera of the Zeltharian Empire. You have been brought aboard our vessel, the Sovereign's Grace, for a very important purpose." Jake stared at the creature in disbelief. His mind tried to make sense of what was happening, but nothing seemed real. "This has to be a dream," he said to himself. Commander Vextera made a sound that might have been laughter. "This is not a dream, human. You are very far from your planet Earth. We have been watching your species for many years and have decided that you possess certain qualities that we need." Jake finally managed to stand up on shaky legs. "What do you mean, watching us? What do you want from me? I'm just an engineer. I don't know anything important." The commander walked closer to Jake. Her golden eyes seemed to study every part of him. "You know more than you think. Your species has something that ours has lost. We need your help to save our people." Jake backed away until he hit the wall. Behind him, the metal was cold against his back. "I don't understand. Save your people from what?" Commander Vextera was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Our royal bloodline is dying. For hundreds of years, our nobles have been getting weaker. Their children are sick and do not live long lives. Our scientists believe that breeding with humans can make our bloodline strong again." The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. "Breeding? You want me to breed with your people, not my people, the royal family. You have been chosen to help create the next generation of Zeltharian rulers. It is a great honor." Jake felt sick. "I didn't choose anything. You kidnapped me. This is insane." Commander Vextera's eyes grew cold. "Your feelings do not matter. This is bigger than one human. The future of the Zeltharian Empire depends on this." Before Jake could respond, the door opened again. Another Zeltharian entered the room, but this one was different. She was smaller than the commander, and her scales were silver blue instead of bronze. She wore a long robe made of fine material, and a crown of some kind of crystal sat on her head. She moved with grace and confidence, but Jake could see something in her eyes that looked like sadness. "Commander Vextera, you may leave us," the new arrival said. Her voice was musical and pleasant to hear. The commander bowed her head. "Yes, Princess Zerlin." She left the room, and the door closed behind her. Princess Zerlin looked at Jake for a long time without speaking. Finally she said, "I am sorry for the way you were brought here. It was not my choice." Jake studied her face. She seemed different from the commander, less cold and more human somehow. "If it wasn't your choice, then whose was it?" "The Royal Council. They make the decisions for our empire. My father, the Emperor, is old and sick. The Council has more power now than ever before." Jake felt a small spark of hope. Maybe this princess was someone he could talk to. Someone who might help him. "Can you send me home?" Princess Zerlin shook her head sadly. "I cannot. The Council has decided, and their word is law. But I want you to know that I do not like this situation any more than you do." "Then why are you going along with it?" The princess was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I have no choice either. I am the heir to the throne. Everything I do must be for the good of the empire." Even this, Jake realized that the princess was as trapped as he was. She might have a title and wear a crown, but she was still a prisoner in her own life. "What happens now? You will be given quarters in the royal wing of the ship. You have 7 days to adjust to your new situation. Then the breeding protocols will begin." Jake felt the room spin around him. 7 days. In 7 days his life, as he knew it, would be over. He would become nothing more than a tool for these aliens to use. The thought made him angry and scared at the same time. Princess Zerlin seemed to read his thoughts. "I know this is difficult, but try to understand. My people are dying. If we do nothing, the royal bloodline will end, and our empire will fall into chaos. Millions will suffer." Jake looked into her silver blue eyes and saw real pain there. She was not a monster. She was just someone trying to save her people, the only way she knew how. But that didn't make what was happening to him right. 7 days, Jake said. 7 days, the princess agreed. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped and looked back at him. "For what it is worth, I truly am sorry." The door closed and Jake was alone again. He sat down on the cold floor and put his head in his hands. Everything he had known was gone. His job, his apartment, his life on Earth. All of it might as well have never existed. But Jake was not the kind of person who gave up easily. 7 days was not much time, but it was something. Maybe he could find a way out of this. Maybe he could convince them to let him go. Or maybe he could find another solution that would help both him and the Zeltharians. Jake stood up and walked around the room. He needed to learn everything he could about these aliens and their ship. He needed to understand their culture and their weaknesses. Most importantly, he needed to find allies. The princess seemed like she might be sympathetic. She said she didn't like the situation either. Maybe there were others who felt the same way. Jake had always been good at solving problems. This was just a bigger problem than any he had faced before. He looked at the strange symbols on the walls and wondered what they meant. 7 days to figure out how to save himself and maybe help the Zeltharians find a better way to solve their problems. It seemed impossible, but Jake had to try. The alternative was too terrible to think about. Jake spent his first night on the alien ship lying on what passed for a bed in his new quarters. The room was much larger than his apartment back in Denver, but it felt like a prison cell. The walls were the same dark material as the room where he had first awakened, but here they were, decorated with tapestries that showed scenes of Zeltharian history. The bed was too long for a human, and made of some kind of material that adjusted to his body temperature. Jake found it impossible to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Commander Vextera's golden eyes staring at him. He kept thinking about what would happen when his 7 days were up. When morning came, Jake was not sure how he knew it was morning. There were no windows in his room, and the light from the walls never changed. But somehow, his body told him that time had passed. A soft chime sounded, and the door to his room opened. A Zeltharian entered, carrying a tray of food. This one was different from the others Jake had met. He was older, with gray scales mixed in with the bronze ones. His eyes were kind, and he moved slowly, like someone who had lived a long life. He wore a simple robe instead of a military uniform. "Good morning, human Jake," the old Zeltharian said. His voice was gentle and reminded Jake of his grandfather. "I am Dr. Kethmer. I am here to check on your health and answer any questions you might have." Jake sat up in bed and looked at the food on the tray. It looked strange, but smelled good. His stomach reminded him that he had not eaten anything since before he was taken from Earth. "Thank you, Dr. Kethmer. Can you tell me what this food is?" The doctor smiled, and Jake was surprised to see that Zeltharians had teeth much like humans. "It is protein from sea creatures on our home world mixed with grains and vegetables. It has been prepared to match human nutritional needs. You must keep your strength up." Jake took a bite of the food. It tasted better than it looked, and reminded him a little of fish and rice. "Dr. Kethmer, can I ask you something?" "Of course. That is why I am here." Jake set down his fork and looked at the old doctor. "Do you think what your people are doing to me is right?" Dr. Kethmer was quiet for a long time. He walked to one of the tapestries on the wall and stared at it. The tapestry showed Zeltharian ships flying among the stars. "That is a difficult question, young Jake. I am a scientist. I believe in facts and evidence. The facts say that our royal bloodline is weakening with each generation. The evidence suggests that human genetic material could help strengthen it." "That's not what I asked," Jake said. "I asked if you think it's right." The doctor turned back to Jake. His eyes looked sad and tired. "No, I do not think it is right to take someone from their home and force them to do something against their will. But I also know that if we do nothing, my people will suffer. It is a problem with no easy answers." Jake felt a spark of hope. Here was someone who might understand his situation. Someone who had doubts about what the council was doing. "Dr. Kethmer, tell me about your people. Help me understand why this is happening." The doctor sat down in a chair near Jake's bed. "We Zeltharians have ruled this part of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Our empire is vast and includes many different worlds and species. But we have always been few in number compared to those we rule." Jake finished eating and gave the doctor his full attention. This was important information. Long ago, our ancestors decided that only the strongest and smartest Zeltharians should be allowed to reproduce. They created a caste system where the nobles married only other nobles. For many generations this worked well. Our rulers were indeed strong and intelligent. But something went wrong, Jake said. Dr. Kethmer nodded. "Yes. After many generations of breeding only within the same small group, our genetic diversity became very limited. The royal families began to have children who were sick or weak. Many died young. Others could not have children of their own." Jake began to understand the problem. He had learned about genetics in college. When a population became too isolated, genetically bad things happened. So the council decided to bring in outside genetic material. Exactly. But they chose the wrong solution. Instead of changing our entire system, they decided to use other species as breeding stock. Over the centuries, they have tried this with several different alien races. None of the attempts have been successful. "What happened to the other species they tried this with?" Jake asked. He was not sure. He wanted to know the answer. Dr. Kethmer's expression grew even sadder. Some were simply incompatible. The offspring did not survive. Others produced children, but they were rejected by Zeltharian society because they looked too different. A few attempts produced healthy children, but the council decided they were not good enough and ended the programs. Jake felt sick to his stomach. What happened to the parents from those other species? Most were returned to their home worlds, but some chose to stay and work for the Empire. They were treated well, but they were never free to leave if they changed their minds. Jake understood what the doctor was really telling him. Even if the breeding program worked, he might never see Earth again. He would become a permanent part of the Zeltharian Empire whether he wanted to or not. Dr. Kethmer, why are humans different? Why do the Council think we will succeed where others failed? The doctor stood up and walked to another tapestry. This one showed Zeltharians and other aliens working together on some kind of construction project. Your species is remarkable, Jake. We have been studying humans for 50% of your years. You are incredibly adaptable. You can survive in almost any environment. You are intelligent, but also creative in ways that most species are not. Jake thought about this. Humans did seem to be good at adapting to new situations. Look at him, right? Now, a few days ago he had never even imagined that aliens existed. Now he was having a conversation with one about genetics and galactic politics. There is something else, Dr. Kethmer continued. Human genetic material is very compatible with Zeltharian genetics, more compatible than any other species we have tested. Our computer models suggest that human Zeltharian offspring would be healthy and strong. But you have doubts about the program, Jake said. The doctor nodded. I have many doubts. Forced breeding rarely produces the best results. Stress and unhappiness can affect fertility and the health of offspring. I have told the council this, but they do not listen to me. Jake felt a small flame of hope growing in his chest. If a Zeltharian scientist had doubts about the program, maybe there were others who felt the same way. Maybe he could find allies who would help him find a better solution. Dr. Kethmer, what can you tell me about Princess Zerlin? The doctor's expression softened. She is a good person, Jake. She cares deeply about her people, but she also has a kind heart. The princess has always been different from the rest of the royal family. She asks questions that others do not ask. She thinks about problems in new ways. Does she support the breeding program? She supports anything that will help save our people, but I do not think she is happy about the methods the council has chosen. The princess has always believed that willing cooperation produces better results than force. Jake made a mental note of this. Princess Zerlin might be the key to finding a better solution. If she had influence with the council, and if she was already having doubts about their methods, then maybe he could convince her to help him. Dr. Kethmer, is there any chance that the council would consider a different approach? Something that doesn't involve forcing people to participate. The doctor looked around the room, as if checking to make sure they were alone. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. There might be. Some of the younger nobles have been asking questions about our traditional ways. They wonder if there might be better methods, but they are afraid to speak up against the older members of the council. What about the emperor? Does he support the breeding program? Emperor Vexander is very old and very sick. He wants to see the royal bloodline saved before he dies. He will support anything the council tells him will accomplish this goal. But if someone could show him a better way, he might listen. Jake felt excitement building inside him. There were cracks in the Zeltharian power structure. People who had doubts about what they were doing. People who might be willing to consider alternatives if someone showed them a better path. Dr. Kethmer, I need to ask you a favor. The doctor raised one scaly eyebrow. What kind of favor? I need to learn everything I can about your people and your culture. I need to understand how your government works and who has real power. Can you help me with this? Dr. Kethmer studied Jake's face for a long moment. Why do you want to know these things? Jake took a deep breath. Because I think there might be a way. To solve your genetic problem that doesn't involve kidnapping people or forcing them to breed. But I need to understand your society before I can figure out what that solution might be. The doctor was quiet for a very long time. Jake could see him thinking carefully about what Jake had said. Finally, he nodded. I will help you learn what you need to know. But you must be very careful. If the council discovers that I am giving you information they consider sensitive, they will not be pleased. I understand the risk you're taking, Jake said. Thank you. Dr. Kethmer picked up the empty food tray. I will return tomorrow with more food, and we can begin your education about Zeltharian society. But remember, Jake, you still only have 6 more days before the breeding protocols begin. Whatever solution you think you can find, you must find it quickly. After the doctor left, Jake lay back down on his bed and stared at the ceiling. 6 days was not much time, but it was better than no time at all. He had learned several important things from his conversation with Dr. Kethmer. The Zeltharian Council was not united in their support of the breeding program. Princess Zarelyn had doubts about their methods. There were younger nobles who questioned traditional ways. Most importantly, there was at least one scientist who was willing to help Jake learn what he needed to know. Jake closed his eyes and began to plan. He needed to find a way to speak with Princess Zarelyn privately. He needed to learn more about the political situation in the Empire, and he needed to come up with an alternative solution that would satisfy the Council's need to save the royal bloodline while respecting the rights of the people involved. It seemed impossible, but Jake had always been good at solving impossible problems. The key was to break big problems down into smaller pieces and solve them one at a time. He had 6 days to save himself and maybe help the Zeltharians find a better way forward. Jake Morrison had never backed down from a challenge in his life. He was not going to start now. Jake had spent 3 days learning everything Dr. Kethmer could teach him about Zeltharian society. The old scientist brought him books written in Zeltharian script, along with a translation device that helped Jake understand them. He learned about their history, their government, and their complex social structure. The more Jake learned, the more he understood that the Zeltharians were not evil, they were desperate. Their empire was built on the idea that strong leaders were necessary to keep peace among many different species. If the royal bloodline failed, the entire empire might collapse into war and chaos. But Jake also learned that the current council was stuck in old ways of thinking. They believed that force and control were the only ways to solve problems. They had never considered that voluntary cooperation might work better than coercion. On the 4th day, Jake asked Dr. Kethmer to arrange a private meeting with Princess Zarelyn. The doctor looked nervous about this request, but agreed to try. That evening the princess came to Jake's quarters alone. She wore a simple dress instead of her royal robes and looked tired. Dr. Kethmer says you wanted to speak with me, she said. What do you want to discuss? Jake had spent hours preparing for this conversation. Everything depended on convincing the princess that there was a better way. I want to talk about solving your genetic problem without forcing anyone to participate. Princess. Zarelyn sat down in the chair that Dr. Kethmer usually used. The council has already decided on the best solution. The breeding program will begin in 3 days. But what if there was a better solution? What if I could show you a way to save your royal bloodline that would work better than forced breeding? The princess studied Jake's face. I am listening. Jake took a deep breath. This was his chance. Your scientists believe that human genetics can strengthen Zeltharian bloodlines. They are probably right about that. But forced breeding has many problems. Stress reduces fertility. Unwilling participants often have health problems that affect their children. Most importantly, you can only force a few people to participate. What are you suggesting? Princess Zarelyn asked. A voluntary genetic exchange program? Instead of kidnapping humans, you invite them to participate. You offer them something valuable in return for their cooperation. You treat them as partners instead of breeding stock. The princess frowned. Why would humans agree to such a thing? What could we offer them that would make them willing to leave their home world? Jake had thought about this question for hours. Many things. Advanced technology that could help solve problems on Earth. Medical knowledge that could cure diseases. Scientific information about the galaxy. Some humans would be interested in these things, but would enough humans participate to make a difference? More than you think. Humans are naturally curious about other species and other worlds. If you approached us as equals, instead of as conquerors, many would be excited to be part of such a program. Princess Zarelyn was quiet for a long time. Jake could see her thinking about what he had said. Even if what you say is true, the council would never agree to such a plan. They believe that showing weakness encourages rebellion. But it's not weakness, Jake said. It's intelligence. Smart leaders know that willing allies are stronger than unwilling subjects. Your empire includes many different species. How many of them truly support Zeltharian rule? How many are just waiting for a chance to rebel? The princess looked surprised. How do you know about the rebellions? Jake had learned about them from the history books Dr. Kethmer had given him, because forced rule always creates resistance. If you changed your approach with humans, other species would notice. They might begin to see the empire as something worth supporting, instead of something to fight against. You are suggesting that we change the fundamental nature of our empire, based on one breeding program. I'm suggesting that you start with this program, and see what happens. If voluntary cooperation works better than force, then maybe it's worth trying in other areas too. Princess Zarelyn stood up and walked to one of the tapestries on Jake's wall. The council would call such ideas dangerous. They would say that giving people choices leads to chaos. Does it though? On Earth we have many different governments. Some are based on force and control. Others are based on cooperation and choice. Which ones are more stable? Which ones have happier citizens who are willing to fight to defend their homes? The princess turned back to Jake. You speak of things that are foreign to our culture. We have maintained order for 2,000 years, using our current methods. And now your current methods are failing. Your royal bloodline is dying. Your empire faces rebellions. Maybe it's time to try something new. Jake could see that his words were having an effect. The princess looked troubled and uncertain. He decided to push a little harder. Princess Zarelyn, Dr. Kethmer told me that you were different from other members of the royal family. He said you ask questions that others don't ask. What questions have you been asking about the breeding program? The princess sat back down and looked directly at Jake. I have wondered if forced participation will truly produce the results we need. I have wondered if there might be better ways to approach this problem. I have wondered if we are making the right choice. Then help me present an alternative to the council. Give them a choice between the old way and a new way. Let them decide which approach has a better chance of success. The council will not listen to suggestions from a human. Then, you present it. Make it your proposal. You are the heir to the throne. Your opinion carries weight. Princess Zarelyn was quiet for a very long time. Jake watched her face and could see the internal struggle she was having. Finally she spoke. What exactly are you proposing? Jake felt a surge of excitement. She was actually considering it. A comprehensive research program that studies human and Zeltharian genetic compatibility. We establish protocols for voluntary participation that respect the rights and dignity of all involved. We offer incentives that make participation attractive. To humans, we create a model that could be expanded if it proves successful. And you would be willing to participate in such a program? Jake had expected this question. If it was truly voluntary, and if I was treated as an equal partner instead of breeding stock, then yes, I would consider it. But more importantly, other humans would also consider it. You could have dozens or even hundreds of willing participants instead of a few unwilling ones. The princess stood up again. I need time to think about this. Such a proposal would be very controversial. If I present it to the council and they reject it, I might lose what little influence I have. But if you don't present it, what happens in 3 days? The breeding program begins with unwilling participants. Even if it produces children, those children will grow up knowing that their parents were forced together. Is that the foundation you want for the next generation of Zeltharian rulers? Jake could see that this argument hit home. Princess Zarelyn cared about the future of her people, and she understood that children born from forced unions might have problems that went beyond genetics. There is something else you should consider, Jake continued. Right now I am fighting against this program because I was forced into it. But if you gave me a choice, if you treated me with respect, then I might become an ally instead of an enemy. Willing participants would help make the program succeed. Unwilling participants will sabotage it in ways you cannot imagine. Princess Zarelyn walked to the door, but stopped before leaving. If I were to present such a proposal to the council, what guarantees could you give that humans would actually participate? Jake had been hoping she would ask this question. Let me contact Earth. Let me explain the situation to human scientists and government officials. Let me show them what you are offering in exchange for participation. I guarantee that you will have more volunteers than you can handle. The council would never allow direct contact with Earth. Then send an official diplomatic mission. Approach Earth openly and honestly. Explain your situation and ask for help. Show humans that you see us as equals, worthy of respect and cooperation. The princess opened the door but turned back one more time. You realize that if I present this proposal and the council rejects it, your situation could become much worse. They might decide that you are too dangerous to keep alive. Jake had thought about this risk. Princess, I'm already scheduled to be used as breeding stock against my will. How much worse can my situation get? At least this way I have a chance to help both our species find a better path forward. After the princess left, Jake lay on his bed and thought about their conversation. He believed he had planted seeds of doubt in her mind about the council's approach. She was clearly intelligent and capable of seeing the advantages of voluntary cooperation over forced compliance. But Jake also knew that convincing one person was not enough. Even if Princess Zarelyn agreed to present his proposal to the council, there was no guarantee they would accept it. The old ways of thinking were deeply ingrained in Zeltharian culture. Jake spent the next day working on a detailed presentation of his alternative proposal. He used a translation device to write it in Zeltharian script. He included scientific arguments about why voluntary participation would produce better results. He outlined the potential benefits to the Empire of establishing diplomatic relations with Earth. He even suggested ways that the program could be expanded to include other species if it proved successful. On the 6th day, Princess Zarelyn returned to his quarters. She looked determined but also nervous. I have decided to present your proposal to the council, she said, but I want you to understand the risks. If they reject it, they might decide that you have been a bad influence on me. They might choose to proceed with the breeding program immediately, instead of waiting for the 7th day. Jake nodded. I understand the risks, but I also understand that doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way we have a chance to change things for the better. The princess handed Jake a datapad with his proposal displayed on the screen. I have made some modifications to make it more acceptable to the council. I have emphasized the benefits to the Empire and minimized the changes to traditional approaches. But the core of your idea remains the same. Jake read through the modified proposal. Princess Zarelyn had done an excellent job of presenting his ideas in language that the council might find acceptable. She had framed voluntary cooperation as a strategic advantage, rather than a moral imperative. When will you present this to the council? Jake asked. Tomorrow morning. The council meets to finalize the breeding protocols. I will present your proposal as an alternative approach that might produce superior results. Jake felt nervous excitement building in his chest. Tomorrow would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the future relationship between humans and Zeltharians. Thank you for taking this risk, Princess. I know it's not easy to challenge the traditional ways. Princess Zerilyn smiled for the first time since Jake had met her. You have shown me that sometimes the greatest risk is in not taking any risks at all. If we continue doing things the same way, we will continue getting the same disappointing results. After she left, Jake tried to sleep, but found it impossible. His mind kept racing through all the possible outcomes of tomorrow's council meeting. The best-case scenario was that they would accept his proposal and begin working toward a voluntary cooperation program. The worst case was that they would reject it completely and proceed with forced breeding immediately. But even if they rejected his proposal, Jake felt that he had accomplished something important. He had shown Princess Zerilyn and Dr. Kethmer that there were alternatives to the old ways of thinking. He had planted seeds of change that might grow into something bigger over time. Jake had always believed that the best solutions came from working together, rather than working against each other. Tomorrow he would find out if the Zeltharians were ready to learn that lesson. Either way, he had given everything he had to try to find a better path forward for both their species. The 7th day was about to begin. Jake woke on the 7th day, knowing that his fate would be decided within hours. The council meeting was scheduled for mid-morning, and Princess Zerilyn would present his alternative proposal then. Jake had done everything he could to prepare for this moment, but now he could only wait and hope. Dr. Kethmer arrived with breakfast and news that worried Jake. The council is not pleased that Princess Zerilyn has requested time to present an alternative proposal, the old scientist said. Commander Vextara has been asking questions about who has been giving you information about our society. Jake felt a chill of fear. Are you in danger, Dr. Kethmer? Perhaps, but I am an old Zeltharian, and I have served the Empire faithfully for many years. They will not move against me without strong evidence of wrongdoing. However, you should know that there are others on this ship who support what you are trying to do. Others? Jake asked with surprise. Dr. Kethmer nodded. Word of your proposal has spread among some of the younger crew members. Many of them have begun to question whether the old ways are truly the best ways. Some have even asked me privately if they could meet with you. Jake felt a spark of hope. If his ideas were spreading beyond just Princess Zerilyn and Dr. Kethmer, then maybe there was a real chance for change. Who are these crew members? Scientists, mostly. Engineers, some of the younger officers. They are people who work with facts and evidence every day. They can see that forced solutions often create more problems than they solve. Before Jake could respond, his door chimed and opened. A young Zeltharian in a science uniform entered the room. She had green scales and bright yellow eyes that looked nervous but determined. This is Dr. Yaravan, Dr. Kethmer said. She is one of the geneticists working on the breeding program. Double quotes. Dr. Yaravan bowed slightly to Jake. I wanted to meet the human who has proposed an alternative to our current approach. I have read your proposal, and I believe it has scientific merit. Jake studied the young scientist. What do you think about the current breeding program? I think it is flawed, she said without hesitation. Forced breeding in laboratory animals produces inferior results compared to natural mating behaviors. There is no reason to believe that intelligent species would be any different. Double quotes. Dr. Kethmer looked surprised. You have never expressed these concerns before, because I knew that no one would listen. The council believes that science should serve politics rather than guide it, but this human has shown that there might be another way. Jake felt excitement building. Here was another ally, and she was someone who understood the science behind genetics better than anyone. Dr. Yaravan, what would you need to prove that? Voluntary participation produces better results than forced participation. The young scientist thought for a moment. Controlled studies comparing stress hormones, fertility rates, and offspring health between willing and unwilling participants. It would take time to gather such evidence, but I believe the results would support your proposal. How long? Jake asked. several months at minimum, perhaps a year, for comprehensive data. Jake's heart sank. He did not have months or years. The council was meeting in a few hours, and they expected to begin the breeding program immediately if they rejected his proposal. Dr. Yaravan seemed to understand his disappointment. However, there is already existing research from other species that supports your arguments. I could compile that data and present it to the council as evidence that voluntary cooperation produces superior results. Dr. Kethmer looked worried. That would be very risky for you. Dr. Yaravan, if the council discovers that you are undermining their preferred approach, they could exile you from the science division. The young scientist squared her shoulders. Some risks are worth taking. If we continue with the current approach, we may damage our relationships with other species permanently. The galaxy is watching how we handle this situation. Jake had not considered that angle. What do you mean the galaxy is watching? Dr. Yaravan and Dr. Kethmer exchanged glances. Finally, the older scientist spoke. The Zeltharian Empire is not the only major power in this galaxy. There are other confederations and alliances. Many of them already view us as aggressive expeditionists. If word spreads that we are kidnapping and forcing other species to breed with us, it could unite our enemies against us. Jake began to understand that the stakes were even higher than he had realized. This was not just about his personal freedom, or even the future of the royal bloodline. This was about the Zeltharian Empire's place in galactic politics. Are there other humans on this ship? Jake asked. Others like me who were taken from Earth. Dr. Yaravan nodded. 3 others. They are being held in similar quarters, in different sections of the ship. The council plans to use all 4 of you in the breeding program. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. I want to meet them. If we are going to be in this situation together, we should at least be allowed to support each other. That might be possible, Dr. Kethmer said. I could arrange for you to be moved to a common area where you could speak with the others. It would have to be done carefully, but I think I can make it happen. 3 hours later, Jake found himself in a larger room with 3 other humans. Like him, they all looked confused, angry, and scared, but Jake was relieved to see that they also looked determined to fight for their freedom. The first was Lisa Parker, a biologist from Toronto. She was in her early 30s, with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. The second was Carlos Rivera, a doctor from Mexico City, who spoke with quiet intensity about the ethical violations of their situation. The third was Alex Chen, an engineer from San Francisco, who reminded Jake of himself. We have been trying to figure out how to escape, Alex said, after Jake explained his alternative proposal. But this ship is huge, and we don't know anything about alien technology. Lisa shook her head. Escape might not be possible, but we can make it clear that we will not cooperate with their breeding program. They can force our bodies, but they cannot force our minds. Carlos nodded in agreement. I have been thinking about this from a medical perspective. Stress and resistance will make successful reproduction much less likely. If we are united in our refusal to cooperate, they may be forced to reconsider their approach. Jake felt encouraged by the strength and intelligence of his fellow humans. My proposal is being presented to the council in 1 hour. If they accept it, we might have a chance to change this situation for all of us. But if they reject it, we need to be prepared to resist in every way possible. What kind of resistance? Alex asked. Peaceful resistance. We refuse to cooperate, but we do not become violent. We make it clear that forced breeding will not work, but we leave the door open for voluntary cooperation if they change their approach. Lisa looked thoughtful. That might actually work. If we can show them that willing participants would produce better results than unwilling ones, they might be convinced to try a different method. Carlos agreed. As a doctor, I can tell you that stress hormones severely impact fertility and pregnancy outcomes. If we can document the physiological effects of forced participation versus voluntary participation, the scientific evidence would support Jake's proposal. The four humans spent the next hour planning their response to different scenarios. If the council accepted Jake's proposal, they would work together to make it successful. If the council rejected it, they would resist peacefully, but firmly. Dr. Kethmer returned to inform them that the council meeting was beginning. Princess Zarelyn would present Jake's proposal, first followed by discussion and voting. The results would be announced within 2 hours. Jake and the other humans waited in tense silence. There was nothing more they could do, except hope that logic and compassion would prevail over tradition and force, after what felt like forever. Dr. Kethmer returned with Dr. Yaravan. Both looked grim, and Jake's heart sank before they even spoke. "The council has rejected your proposal," Dr. Kethmer said quietly. "They voted 7-3 against it. Commander Vextera argued that showing weakness to humans would encourage rebellion among other species. The majority agreed with her position." Jake felt disappointed, but not surprised. "What happens now?" Dr. Yaravan stepped forward. "Princess Zarelyn has been confined to her quarters for presenting what the council called dangerous and destabilizing ideas. However, her speech did have an impact on some council members. 3 voted in favor of your proposal, and 2 others abstained rather than voting against it." "That's almost half the council," Lisa said with surprise. "Yes, and the debate has spread beyond the council chambers. Many crew members heard about the discussion and are asking questions about whether there might be better approaches to our problems." Dr. Kethmer looked around the room at all 4 humans. "You should also know that word of your situation has reached other parts of the Empire. Some of the younger nobles on other ships have begun questioning the Council's methods." Carlos leaned forward. "Are you saying that our resistance might inspire others to question the Empire's approaches?" "It is possible. Change often begins with small acts of courage that inspire others to think differently." Jake felt a complex mix of emotions. He was disappointed that his proposal had been rejected, but encouraged that it had started a larger conversation about change. Even if the council proceeded with the breeding program, they had planted seeds of doubt that might grow into something bigger. "Dr. Kethmer, when does the breeding program begin?" Alex asked. The old scientist looked uncomfortable. "Tomorrow morning. The council has ordered that all 4 of you be prepared for the first procedures." Jake looked at his fellow humans. They all nodded at him with determination. They had agreed on their response, and they were ready to implement it. "Then tomorrow morning the council will discover that forced breeding does not work the way they think it does," Jake said. "We will show them through our actions that there is a better way, even if they are not ready to listen to our words." Dr. Yaravan looked worried. "What are you planning to do?" Lisa answered for all of them. "We are going to resist peacefully but completely. We will make it impossible for them to proceed with their program while leaving the door open for voluntary cooperation if they change their approach." Jake nodded. "We are going to prove that human dignity and determination are stronger than alien force and tradition, and maybe we will inspire others to demand better solutions to their problems." Dr. Kethmer and Dr. Yaravan exchanged glances. "We will support you in whatever way we can," the old scientist said, "even if it means risking our own positions." As the 2 Zeltharians left, Jake looked at his fellow humans. Tomorrow would be the most important day of their lives. They would either find a way to change the situation, or they would show the entire Zeltharian Empire that some things could not be taken by force. Either way, they would face it together as humans should, with courage, dignity, and an unshakable belief that there was always a better way, if people were brave enough to look for it. The morning of the 8th day arrived, with tension filling every corridor of the Sovereign's grace. Jake and the other 3 humans had been moved to a medical facility where the breeding procedures were supposed to begin. They sat together in a waiting area, surrounded by alien medical equipment that hummed and glowed with strange lights. Commander Vextera entered with a full escort of guards. Her golden eyes were cold as she looked at the 4 humans. "You will be taken to separate procedure rooms, where our medical teams will begin the breeding protocols. Any resistance will be met with sedation. Jake stood up slowly. The other humans followed his lead. Commander, we have a statement to make before any procedures begin. I am not interested in human statements. You are here to serve the Empire, not to make speeches. Then you should know that we will not cooperate with any forced breeding procedures. We will resist peacefully, but we will resist completely. Any children born from forced unions will suffer psychological damage that will affect their ability to rule effectively. Commander Vextera's scales darkened with anger. You will cooperate whether you choose to or not. Our medical technology can ensure reproduction, regardless of your wishes. Lisa stepped forward. Commander, I am a biologist. I can tell you with scientific certainty that stress hormones produced by unwilling participants will negatively affect fertility, egg quality, and fetal development. Forced breeding produces inferior offspring in every species that has been studied. Carlos nodded in agreement. As a medical doctor, I can document the physiological effects of psychological stress on reproductive health. Any children born from this program will be weaker, not stronger than natural offspring. Alex looked directly at Commander Vextera. You claim to want to strengthen the royal bloodline, but your methods will actually weaken it. We are trying to help you find a better solution. The commander's tail lashed behind her in obvious irritation. Enough of this human nonsense. Guards escort them to the procedure rooms. As the guards moved forward, the door to the medical facility opened. Princess Saralyn entered, despite her supposed confinement. Behind her came Dr. Kethmer, Dr. Yaravan, and several other Zeltharians that Jake did not recognize. Stop, Princess Saralyn commanded. Her voice carried the authority of her royal bloodline. There will be no procedures today. Commander Vextera turned to face the princess. You have been confined to quarters by order of the council. You have no authority here. I have the authority of the heir to the throne, and I have new information that the council needs to hear before this program continues. Dr. Yaravan stepped forward, carrying a datapad. I have compiled research from 17 different species showing that forced breeding produces offspring with higher rates of genetic abnormalities, developmental problems, and shortened lifespans. The scientific evidence clearly supports voluntary cooperation over coercive methods. One of the Zeltharians Jake did not recognize spoke up. I am Captain Nethvis, commander of the science vessel Discovery. My crew has been monitoring communications from other parts of the Empire. Word of the human breeding program has spread, and it is causing serious political problems. Commander Vextera looked uncertain for the first time since Jake had met her. What kind of political problems? 3 member species have formally protested to the Imperial Senate. 2 others have threatened to withdraw from the Empire if the forced breeding program continues. The Galactic Federation has issued a statement condemning our actions and calling for economic sanctions. Jake felt a spark of hope. The political pressure from outside the Empire might force the Council to reconsider their approach. Princess Saralyn moved to stand beside Jake and the other humans. The humans have offered to participate voluntarily in a reformed program that respects their dignity and rights. They are willing to help us solve our genetic crisis, but only if we treat them as equals rather than as breeding stock. The Council has already rejected that proposal, Commander Vextera said. The Council voted based on incomplete information. They did not have the scientific evidence that Dr. Yaravan has compiled. They did not know about the political consequences of forced breeding. They need to vote again with all the facts. Dr. Kethmer stepped forward. I have been in contact with colleagues throughout the Empire. The scientific community overwhelmingly supports voluntary cooperation over forced breeding. Continuing with the current program will damage the Empire's reputation for centuries. Jake decided it was time to make his own statement. Commander Vextera, yesterday, you had 4 unwilling prisoners who would have sabotaged your breeding program in every way possible. Today, you have 4 potential allies who are willing to help solve your genetic crisis. if you approach us with respect and dignity. Which option gives you a better chance of success? The commander looked around the room at the growing number of Zeltharians who supported the alternative approach. Jake could see her calculating the political costs of continuing with the forced breeding program. Even if I agreed to reconsider the approach, the council would never approve major changes to the program, she said finally. Princess Zerlin smiled. The council is meeting an emergency session right now. 3 more members have changed their votes based on the new evidence. Captain Nethvis has presented the political consequences to them. Dr. Yaravan has shown them the scientific data. They are preparing to vote again. Before Commander Vextara could respond, her communication device chimed. She listened to a message in the Zeltharian language, then looked up with surprise and frustration. The council has voted to suspend the breeding program pending a full review of alternative approaches. Princess Zerlin, you are ordered to present a detailed proposal for voluntary cooperation within 3 days. Jake felt relief flooding through his body. They had done it. The forced breeding program was stopped, and there would be a chance to implement something better. But Princess Zerlin was not finished. I want to make something clear to everyone in this room. The humans have shown us that strength comes not from force, but from cooperation. They have taught us that treating others with dignity and respect produces better results than treating them as subjects to be controlled. She turned to face Jake directly. Jake Morrison, you and your fellow humans have changed the course of our empire in just 8 days. You have shown us that there are better ways to solve our problems if we are brave enough to embrace change. Lisa stepped forward. Princess, we are willing to work with you to develop a voluntary program that benefits both our species. But it must be based on genuine partnership and mutual respect. Carlos nodded. Any program we develop should serve as a model for how the Zeltharian Empire interacts with other species. This could be the beginning of a new era of cooperation instead of domination. Alex looked around the room at all the Zeltharians. We want to help you save your royal bloodline, but we also want to help you build a better empire than other species. We'll choose to support rather than being forced to obey. Princess Zerlin considered this for a moment, then nodded. That is exactly what we need to do. We will create a program that not only solves our genetic crises, but also demonstrates that the Zeltharian Empire can change and grow. Over the following weeks, Jake and the other humans worked closely with Princess Zerlin and Dr. Yaravan, a team of progressive Zeltharians, to design a comprehensive voluntary cooperation program. They established protocols for informed consent, fair compensation, and mutual benefit between participating species. The program included provisions for humans to return to Earth if they chose to leave. It offered advanced medical technology and scientific knowledge to humanity in exchange for genetic cooperation. Most importantly, it treated all participants as valued partners rather than as resources to be exploited. News of the program spread throughout the galaxy and had effects that no one had anticipated. Several other species volunteered to participate in similar cooperation programs with the Zeltharians. The Empire's reputation began to change from that of an aggressive conqueror to an innovative leader in interspecies cooperation. 6 months after the original crisis, Jake found himself serving as the human ambassador to the Zeltharian Empire. He had chosen to stay not because he was forced to, but because he believed in the changes they were making together. His relationship with Princess Zerlin had evolved from mutual resistance to genuine partnership to something deeper. When she asked him to consider a permanent union between their species, Jake said yes, not out of duty, but out of love and hope for the future they could build together. Their first child was born 2 years later in a ceremony attended by representatives from dozens of different species. The child was healthy, strong, and intelligent, carrying the best traits of both human and Zeltharian genetics. More importantly, the child was a symbol of what was possible when different peoples chose cooperation over conflict. The reforms that began with Jake's resistance to forced breeding spread throughout the Zeltharian Empire. The rigid caste system was relaxed to allow more social mobility. Democratic principles were introduced to give more species a voice in imperial governance. The empire began to see diversity as a source of strength rather than a threat to stability. Jake often thought about that night in his Denver office when the bright light had changed his life forever. What had seemed like the worst thing that could happen had become the foundation for positive change that affected millions of lives across the galaxy. He had learned that humans possessed something that many other species had lost: the ability to imagine alternatives to the way things had always been done. When faced with impossible situations, humans looked for creative solutions rather than accepting defeat. The Zeltharians had been trapped by their own success. 2,000 years of empire had made them believe that force and control were the only ways to solve problems. It took humans with their stubborn insistence on dignity and choice to show them that there were better paths forward. Dr. Kethmer often visited Jake and Princess Zerlin in their shared quarters aboard the flagship of the reformed Zeltharian fleet. The old scientist had become one of the Empire's leading advocates for interspecies cooperation and voluntary alliance building. "You humans have taught us something very important," he said during one of his visits. "You have shown us that the strongest empires are not built on conquest, but on the willing cooperation of free peoples who choose to work together for mutual benefit." Jake looked out the window of their quarters, at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there was Earth, where other humans were probably working late in their offices, just as he had been doing that night 8 months ago. He wondered if any of them could imagine that their lives might change as dramatically as his had. But Jake had learned that change was not something to fear. Change was an opportunity to build something better than what had come before. The Zeltharian Empire was stronger now than it had ever been, not because it controlled more territory, but because it had earned the voluntary support of its member species. Princess Zerlin joined Jake at the window. She was carrying their child, who gurgled happily in her arms. The baby had Jake's brown eyes and Zerlin's silver-blue skin, creating a unique beauty that represented the best of both species. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Jake smiled and put his arm around his family. "I am thinking about how sometimes the worst situations can lead to the best outcomes if you refuse to give up hope. And what do you hope for now?" Jake looked at their child, then at the stars beyond. "I hope that our son grows up in a galaxy where all species choose cooperation over conflict. I hope that the changes we have started here continue to spread, until every empire and every world learns that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker." Princess Zerlin smiled. "Those are good hopes, and I think they are hopes that will come true." Jake nodded. He had learned that humans had a special gift for turning impossible situations into opportunities for positive change. They had shown the Zeltharian Empire that there was always a better way if people were brave enough to look for it. The future was full of possibilities, and Jake Morrison, former engineer from Denver, was ready to help build a galaxy where those possibilities could become reality. It had all started with one human refusing to accept that force was stronger than choice. Sometimes that was all it took to change everything.